The Starry, Starry Night. Fact 1. The most flawless reproduction of Van Gogh's famous painting, The Starry Night, was actually combed into the leg hair of a woman who, it must be noted, has legs for days. Fact 2. The reproduction was sold on the underground market as the original, signature and all. Fact 3. The legs have now been hung in a rich, fat businessman's penthouse. But this is his second home, and anyway, he travels a lot for work. This is just as well, as the woman to whom the legs are attached needs to get down sometimes and pace around to keep the blood flowing. She uncorks vintage wines and tips them into the sink, one by one. Eventually, the businessman notices something and calls an exterminator. The likelihood of rodents at the top of a gold-plated tower does not elude the exterminator, who, after all, has much better training. His eyes lock with those of the woman to whom the legs are attached, but he looks away, saying nothing. He adds an extra 0 to the end of his fee. The legs twitch and find themselves aching for home. Night after night, the woman to whom the legs are attached stares out at the sky and tries to perfect its swirling, pointing her toes first this way, then that. Once she turns herself upside down, cat-like, convinced that this will more closely resemble the original. But the businessman's sofa faces the other way, and anyway, he does not know much about skies. The closest he comes to understanding is at lunch when a potential investor happens to mention an interest in fine art. The businessman boasts unashamedly that he possesses one of the most famous paintings in the world. "I saw it once at the Louvre," says the investor. "I wasn't a fan of the Impressionists before, but oh my, up close it almost seems to be moving." The businessman pauses. "I know exactly what you mean," he says, thinking back to the time he saw his painting cough. After this, he cannot stop looking. He spends more time in the apartment, allowing his wife and children to believe he is having an affair. In reality, he is standing by the sofa, staring back and forth between legs and ever-changing sky. Each time he turns, the legs readjust themselves slightly, but the woman to whom they are attached does not dare blink. Consequently, her eyes soon begin streaming, a puddle forming on the penthouse's ebony floor. The businessman is too busy staring to notice, but his property manager calls in a plumber after the tears have leaked onto the ceiling below. The plumber is less astute than the exterminator, but still no idiot. When no source for the leak can be found in the piping, he dips his finger into the salty mixture and tastes it, correctly identifying the liquid as teardrops, but failing to notice an aftertaste of mascara. The businessman incorrectly assumes that the tears are his own. Not having eaten or slept for months, a short time later he lies on his deathbed. With his final breath, he smiles and announces to the room, with nobody left but a pair of legs attached to a woman pinned to an otherwise bare and creaking wall, that he can die satisfied, knowing that he has been moved to tears by a famous work of art. Thank you. Hello, my name is Abby. I wrote that story in the bath. I write mainly in the bath. I would like to own a bath, but I live in a disabled adapted flat, and apparently a bathtub would be a safety hazard. Ironically, the one thing that eases the symptoms of my disability is a bath. So I purchase a blue inflatable bathtub from Korea. It's designed for city blocks where everyone is forced to remain upright. When I fill it, the water sits over my shoulders, so hot it could melt its own container. If I get out alone, I will faint. I surround the tub with different sized chairs, each topped with a cup of iced water to bring me round. I switch out all the lights and turn on an illuminated plastic pyramid. It plays ocean noises and whale sounds on a loop. I think about sticking glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, but this isn't a home, it's all my savings. So I sit, silent and bent-legged, folding my toes until their swollen creases soften. I barely breathe, careful for the skin on my back not to scrape the tub's plastic seams. And I should explain at this point that I hallucinate easily. If the water is too warm, if my pain has led to the level of sleep deprivation that they use in torture, if I am listening to Claude Debussy or Radiohead's OK Computer. Bathtub Diary, London, February 2018. I lifted a medicine ball because I believed in medicine. Believed at least that the problem could be cured by increasing gravity's pull on my putty limbs. I lifted the ball and knew instantly I was wrong, but I held on tight. I moved with the ball. I told myself it would help me. Medicine. I lifted it waist high, knowing instantly my mistake. But medicine. I rotated it 3 times clockwise, 3 times back. I spent the rest of that day in a heady mix of euphoria and twitch of muscles that do not like to be woken. At night I took my medicine, but the ball was stronger. I kept on twitching. Slumber was cold and dead. Pictures did not come into me. All night I thought of medicine, how the morning after I might creep towards the pool to cure this error in exercise judgment, dragging my shoulders just below the surface and turning them 3 times clockwise, 3 times back. At 6 or 7 a.m, my beloved awoke. I rolled headfirst onto his pillow. I buried my face in his shoulder and breathed his breath, hoping to borrow his stillness. Medicine. Nothing settled. I allowed my lungs to resume their own pace. My limbs were coiled and revolting, and then, between wake and asleep, I am the shape of my scenes, and St. Teresa arrived at St. Paul's crying, a split line, a floating hallway. If that's what heaven's like, nuns sat on my chest and shrieking. I felt it, years of not knowing, tonguelessly in the half-light, and where my lips end, I am frictionless. And if you were seeking proof that we are undesigned for such gravity falling back on our faith, I felt it, limbless and twined and falling in multiples. Sunbeams have split, they're pulsing apart, a marionette entangles, wetting the bed. Dinner is over, fingers picking between my teeth where they shouldn't be. I felt it, a light plug factory, garbage truck, statues carved with electric breath, crying milk in the darkness, yawning into rust.